Hello friends, welcome back. In this tutorial, we will study about transaction. A transaction is an executing program that forms a logical unit of database processing. A transaction includes one or more database access operations like insertion, deletion, modification, or retrieval operations. If the database operations in a transaction do not update the database but only retrieve data, then the transaction is called a read-only transaction. A transaction is an atomic unit of work that is either completed in its entirety or not done at all. Now, see, this is the state transition diagram, which shows how a transaction moves through its execution states. A transaction goes into an active state immediately after it starts execution, where it can issue read and write operations. When the transaction ends, it moves to the partially committed state. At this point, some recovery protocol need to ensure that a system failure will not result in an inability to record the changes of the transaction permanently. Once the check is successful, the transaction is said to have reached its commit point and enters the committed state. Once a transaction is committed, it has concluded its execution successfully and all its changes must be recorded permanently in database. A transaction can go to the failed state if one of the check fails or if the transaction is aborted during its active state. The transaction may then have to be rolled back to undo the effect of its write operations on the database. The terminated state corresponds to the transaction leaving the system. Now, let us see the properties of transaction. Transaction should possess several properties. They are often called ACID properties. When we say ACID properties, then A stands for atomicity. Now let us see these ACID properties. A stands for atomicity, C stands for consistency preservation, I stands for isolation, and D stands for durability. So let us see the atomicity property. According to this property, a transaction is an atomic unit of processing. It is either performed in its entirety or not performed at all. Now the second property is a consistency preservation property. A transaction is consistency preserving if its complete execution takes the database from one consistent state to another. Third property is isolation property. According to this property, the execution of a transaction should not be interfered with by any other transaction executing concurrently. A transaction should appear as though it is being executed in isolation from other transactions. Fourth property is durability. The changes applied to the database by a committed transaction must persist in the database.